Today's video is about cleaning up after yourself, especially in the Mac file system. Of course, this is not the most important or the most interesting topic to talk about, but I feel it is something that makes my life easier and more structured, and it helps me stay focused on the tasks and files that I actually need. I've talked about Finder and the file system in a different video, and you can find the video for that in the description below or here in this corner. Today is more about the higher level and just looking which folders are for what kind of things and how to organize your stuff. First thing is that you have a home folder, which I would definitely recommend to kind of get used to or to understand which folders are in there, because there are actually some folders that cannot be removed and they have specific reasons to be there. I think once you understood them, it makes a lot of sense to disagree with them sometimes and just have them there but not really use them. But if you don't know that they are there and what they are for, it might be hard to do that. The file structure of the home folder in macOS is actually set up in a way to have a applications folder, which is a secondary applications folder, because there's actually the main applications folder, which has the applications that are there for every user on the system. So if you have multiple accounts on the Mac, it's actually better to have the application in there, because then everybody on the system can use them. But every user has their own applications folder, and that is very useful if you have specific programs that only one person on the whole system should be able to use. Then of course you have the desktop, which holds all the files that are actually visible on the desktop. Then you have the documents folder, which is intended to be used for documents, but that's one of the things where I disagree. The documents folder for me makes no sense whatsoever, and I pretty much use Google Drive for whatever files should go into the documents folder. But there are applications who actually store documents in the documents folder, and that's the reason why it's still there and it needs to be. And then we have the downloads folder, and that of course is for all the downloads that you make from either Safari or Chrome. And it is pretty much set as the default folder, and I think it's a very important folder because for me, all the things that I download land there, but I always try to keep it clean and move stuff away as soon as I know where to put it, or delete the stuff after I've used it. For example, if I download an application in a DMG file, I actually remove that file right after I have installed the software because I don't really need it anymore, and if I need it again, I can just download it again. And on my file system, I have the Google Drive folder, which of course is the Google Drive folder that is synchronized to the Google Drive, but that of course is not a default folder. It is actually something that comes if you install the Google Drive. Then there's the library, which is a system folder, and the system actually stores different things there. For example, the cache files from Chrome, so some websites actually load faster. Also, there are a lot of settings files for different applications, and sometimes it is necessary to go in there, but rarely so. So in the default settings, the library folder is actually hidden away and you might not actually use it, so don't bother if it's not there. Then there's the movies folder, which is again a folder that I rarely ever use, but there are programs who have that folder as their default location. For example, iMovie puts its library there. I use Premiere Pro and I have my project files on the external hard drives, so I rarely use this folder, and there are again some applications who actually put stuff there. For me, there are some motion templates, for example, and some LUTs. Next is the music folder, and I personally think it's actually a folder that is just there to hold the iTunes library, maybe also the GarageBand, but nothing else ever goes in there for me. It is a folder that is basically only the library for iTunes, but if you do a lot with music and you want to organize your files, I would say that is the place to put them. The same is true for the movies folder. If you have not a lot of movies or you have a lot of internal space, I would definitely recommend putting your movies there if you actually want to store them on the internal hard drive, because most of the Macs that are sold are actually not that big in terms of storage. Next up, we have the pictures folder, and that is a folder that I use a lot because I have my Lightroom library there. Then also the photo booth puts its library there, the Photos application itself puts its library there, and I have a folder for my wallpapers also stored there. Besides the Lightroom library, I actually store the pictures that I manage in my Lightroom library on an external hard drive, but the library for the current year is always on my hard drive because I want to take it with me, and I have different hard drives that I work with, so I want to have that library on the Mac because it is the essential part to manage all the other hard drives and actually be able to manage all the picture folders that I have across different drives. A folder that is probably again very rarely used is the public folder. That is intended to be a kind of place where you put files that are shared across the network. Now with internet sharing, that is rarely ever used, and I would say that is probably one of the least used features for most people out there. Then we have the sites folder, which is intended to be used for web development or putting websites in there to test them out, and there is an internal server system that is actually using that folder to host those websites. Again, something that probably never gets used, and if you actually do web development, at least for me, I only use it for storing my project files there, and I don't really use the internal web server. I have set up my own with Brew. Those are pretty much the standard folders, and on the screen you can see I have a couple other folders and links. The one right at the top is the @export, which is basically the place where I have set up my Lightroom export presets to export pictures into. And then I have two links, which are @G-Drive and @Minidrive. The Google Drive is actually just a link to the Google Drive folder itself, which is just a couple lines below. But the thing is, I use the Google Drive folder a lot, and for navigating with a keyboard, it's much easier to just go one step down instead of 4 or 5. The same goes for the Minidrive. The Minidrive is actually an extension that I put into my SD card reader slot, and I have made a video about it as well. You can find the link to that in the description below or up here. And of course we have the Adobe folder, which is essentially all the Adobe preferences, settings and stuff like that that are managed by the Creative Cloud that I use for video and photo editing. The Creative Clouds folder is again something coming with the Creative Cloud, of course, and it's basically those 20 gigabytes of storage that you get if you have the collection. The last folder in this list is the VirtualBox VMs, and that is a place where I put my virtual boxes, and those are systems basically where I run Windows in them, for example some tax programs that are needed in Germany and not available on a Mac. But that's pretty much the basic Finder folder system that you get if you open your own home folder, and that is definitely a place where you should think about where to put your files, because it might be problematic to find your files afterwards. Because if you have a project that has pictures and video, for example, would you put it into the movies folder or in the pictures folder? And that is where I go another route from all these folders. I normally have set up the Google Drive, and there's a projects folder where I then manage my projects. And if a project actually has movie and picture, then most likely I will have a folder inside that project folder also called pictures or movie. And that makes it much easier to organize my files, because they are pretty much bound to that project and not to anything else. And then if I search for something, I can just search for the project, and then I will find the pictures and the movies. One very interesting thing that Apple introduced in the last couple of versions was iCloud Drive, which is kind of interesting, but not really. There are actually programs that offer to store files in the iCloud Drive by default, but I never actually started using that, mainly because of the same reason I just said, that I actually store my files within project files and not necessarily on a per application use. So I, for example, have the Excel sheet and the Word document next to each other, and not one folder for Excel sheets and one folder for Word documents. And also the iCloud by default has only 5 gigabytes of storage, and if you already own an iPhone and or an iPad, then those 5 gigabytes actually are pretty much used for backup. However, the new setup process of the Mac actually asks you if you want to synchronize the documents and the desktop folder to the iCloud. I personally don't do it. If you want your files to be kind of backed up and also available on your mobile device, then this might be a good option for you. I personally prefer Google Drive to do that. The last two things I wanted to note in this video are that I think it is absolutely mandatory to kind of clean up after yourself and put the things where they belong. Have a folder for work stuff and a folder for personal stuff, and then have your folder structure in that folder where you know where you put your files. For example, if you have some tax returns, maybe those documents are in a folder called tax and it is personal because it's not really work related, then maybe it makes sense to have a work folder to actually put those files together. The desktop is a place where many people have those files and they are just flying around, sorted or not sorted in any way, and that feels very cluttered for me. I don't like it. Maybe you disagree and you love your chaos on the desktop, but I just don't like it. I like my files either in the Google Drive or on external hard drives, of course with backup solutions that I have talked about before, but the desktop and the downloads folder are two folders that I try to keep empty as much as possible, because if I leave the files there for too long, it's most likely that they never get used or never get stored away. So keep your system clean and organized. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this every day. Like it if it was helpful, and let me know in the comments down below how you organize your files. I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye.